The Duke of Blackthorn stood at his study window, watching his wife's carriage disappear into the morning fog, and felt nothing. That was the problem. For 3 years, he'd perfected the art of feeling nothing, built walls so high, so thick, that no pain could reach him. But walls don't just keep suffering out, they trap you inside. And by the time Adrian Blackthorn realized what he'd done, the woman who'd tried to save him had already stopped trying. Now she was gone. Not dead. Worse. Alive, breathing, and completely done with him. This is the story of a man who chose ice over intimacy, control over connection, and paid a price no fortune could cover. If you want to see how far this story travels, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. Let's see where this tale reaches. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The Blackthorn estate sprawled across the northern frontier like a sleeping giant, 15,000 acres of windswept moorland, dense forests, and villages that depended entirely on the duchy for survival. The main house sat on a hill overlooking everything, a gray stone fortress that had weathered 2 centuries of storms, wars, and the rise and fall of lesser families. Adrian Blackthorn inherited it all at 23. Not because he was ready, not because he wanted it, but because his father had died in the worst way a man could die, slowly, hollowed out by grief after Adrian's mother passed during a particularly brutal winter. Adrian watched his father disintegrate, watched a powerful man become a ghost, watched him stop eating, stop speaking, stop existing in any meaningful way. The estate fell into chaos. Tenants went unpaid, contracts lapsed, rivals circled like wolves. And young Adrian learned a lesson that carved itself into his bones. Love destroys you. So he built his life around a simple principle: feel nothing, lose nothing. By 28, he'd restored the Blackthorn fortune, expanded their holdings, and earned a reputation as the most efficient, calculating lord in the Northern Territories. Fair, but untouchable. Reasonable, but cold. People respected him. Nobody knew him. That suited Adrian just fine, until his advisors cornered him in his study one winter afternoon with an unavoidable truth. He needed an heir. The duchy required continuity. That meant marriage. Not a love match, Adrian said flatly, not looking up from the contract he was reviewing. A partnership. Find me someone sensible. His steward, Preston, a man who'd served the Blackthorns for 40 years, cleared his throat. The Hartwell family has a daughter. Good bloodline, well-educated, no scandals. The family's financially stable but not ambitious. They're looking for security, not social climbing. Perfect. Adrian signed the document in front of him with sharp, precise strokes. Arrange a meeting. Preston hesitated. Your Grace, perhaps you should... I should what? Adrian's pale gray eyes lifted, cool and direct. Court her? Pretend this is something it isn't? I need a wife who understands what this is. A practical arrangement. If Miss Hartwell can't accept that, find someone who can. The meeting happened 3 weeks later. Lillian Hartwell arrived at Blackthorn Manor on a gray March morning, accompanied by her father, a retired military officer with kind eyes and a firm handshake, and her younger sister Clara, who couldn't stop staring at the portraits in the entrance hall. Adrian met them in the drawing room, perfectly composed in dark wool and polished boots. He bowed. They curtsied. The formalities were observed with clockwork precision. Miss Hartwell, Adrian's voice was cultured, neutral. Thank you for coming. I trust the journey wasn't too difficult. Not at all, Your Grace. Lillian's voice surprised him. Warm, steady, with none of the nervous flutter he'd expected. She was younger than him by 5 years, with dark auburn hair pinned simply and intelligent brown eyes that met his directly. Not beautiful in the flashy way society valued, but striking, composed, good, composure he could work with. They sat. Tea was served. Her father and sister made polite conversation about the estate, the weather, the upcoming spring planting. Lillian mostly listened, occasionally adding a thoughtful comment about crop rotation or asking Preston an astute question about the estate's wool production. Adrian observed her carefully. No giggling, no obvious attempts to charm him. No performative displays of accomplishment. No one rushed to mention her piano playing or watercolors. After 30 minutes, he made his decision. Miss Hartwell, may I speak with you privately? Her father tensed slightly, but Lillian simply nodded. Of course. They walked to the conservatory. Adrian's one concession to softness, a glass-roofed room full of plants his mother had loved. He'd kept it maintained. He never went there. Lillian paused inside the doorway, genuine pleasure crossing her face. "Oh, this is beautiful. It was my mother's." The words came out clipped. Adrian moved past the moment quickly. "Miss Hartwell, I'll be direct. I need a wife. Not for romance, for practical reasons. An heir, a competent manager of the household, someone who can represent the family at necessary social functions. In return, you'll have financial security, status, and complete autonomy in managing your own time and interests. I won't interfere with your life, and I expect the same courtesy." He delivered versions of this speech to himself a dozen times. It was rational, clear, honest. Lillian was quiet for a moment, her fingers brushing the leaves of a lemon tree. "You're describing a business arrangement." "Yes." "And you believe that's sustainable, long-term?" "I believe it's more sustainable than the alternative." Adrian kept his voice even. "Emotional entanglement creates vulnerability, dependency. I've seen what that does to people. This is cleaner." "Cleaner." She repeated the word like she was tasting it, testing its weight. Then she turned to face him fully. "Your Grace, may I ask you something directly?" "Of course." "Do you actually want a partner, or do you want a well-dressed stranger living in your house?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Adrian felt something flicker in his chest. Irritation maybe, or recognition that this woman was sharper than he'd anticipated. He crushed the feeling immediately. "I want someone competent who won't expect things I can't provide." Lillian studied him for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression, not judgment exactly, but a kind of measured assessment, like she was solving a complex equation. Finally, she said, "I'll need time to consider." "Of course, take whatever time you need." She smiled then, small and unreadable. "Thank you for your honesty, Your Grace. That's rarer than you might think." 3 weeks later, Lillian Hartwell accepted his proposal. The wedding was efficient, elegant, and utterly impersonal. 200 guests, perfect weather, flawless execution. Lillian wore ivory silk and carried white roses. Adrian stood beside her and spoke his vows with the same calm precision he used for business negotiations. When the officiant pronounced them married, Adrian kissed his wife's hand, not her lips. Appropriate, professional. Lillian didn't flinch, didn't look disappointed, just smiled politely and turned to greet the guests. The reception flowed smoothly. Lillian moved through the crowd with natural grace, remembering names, asking thoughtful questions, laughing at appropriate moments. She was good at this, better than Adrian had expected. He watched her from across the ballroom, his wife, a stranger in an ivory dress, and felt a distant approval. This would work. Late that night, after the guests had left and the house had settled into silence, Adrian found Lillian in the Duchess's chambers, rooms that had been empty since his mother's death, now hastily refreshed with new linens and flowers. She'd changed into a simpler dress, her hair partially down. She looked younger, more uncertain. "Your Grace," she stood when he entered. "Adrian," he corrected automatically. "We're married now. Formality isn't necessary in private." "Adrian, then." She folded her hands, waiting. The silence stretched. This was the part Adrian had been dreading, not because he didn't understand the physical expectations of marriage, but because those expectations involved a level of intimacy that contradicted everything he'd built his life around. "I won't demand traditional marital relations," he said finally, the words stiff. "Not unless you're agreeable. The goal is an heir eventually, but there's no rush. We can approach that practically when the time is right." Something flickered across Lillian's face. Relief? Disappointment? He couldn't read it. "I see. That's considerate. It's logical." Adrian moved toward the door. "You should rest. Tomorrow Preston will brief you on household management. If you need anything, the staff will assist you." "Adrian?" He paused, hand on the doorframe. "Is this what you want? Truly?" The question confused him. "I just explained. No, I mean..." She hesitated, choosing words carefully. "Do you want a marriage? Or just the appearance of one? I want a functional arrangement that serves both our interests without unnecessary complications." Lillian was quiet for a beat. Then, "Right, of course. Good night, then." Good night. Adrian retreated to his own chambers, 3 doors down the hall, far enough for propriety, and told himself this was working exactly as planned. Azab. The first month of marriage passed like a carefully choreographed dance. Lillian learned the household routines quickly. She met with the housekeeper, reviewed the accounts, organized the staff schedules. She asked intelligent questions, made small improvements, never overstepped. She joined Adrian for breakfast and dinner, the only meals they took together. The conversations were polite, superficial: weather, estate business, upcoming social obligations. The Pembrokes are hosting a dinner next week, Lillian mentioned one evening, buttering her bread with precise movements. They've invited us both. Decline. I already accepted. Adrian's fork paused halfway to his mouth. I don't attend social dinners. You do now. You're married. People expect to see us together occasionally. Her tone was pleasant but firm. It's 2 hours. You'll survive. He wanted to argue, but she was right. This was part of the arrangement. Public appearances maintained the image. Fine. 2 hours. Thank you. She smiled, took a sip of wine, and changed the subject to something neutral about the spring planting. The Pembroke dinner was exactly as tedious as Adrian had anticipated. 12 guests, multiple courses, endless small talk about hunting and society gossip. But Lillian was brilliant. She carried conversations effortlessly, laughed at jokes, asked engaging questions. When Lord Pembroke cornered Adrian with a painfully boring story about his new horses, Lillian appeared at his elbow with a smooth rescue. Forgive me, Lord Pembroke, but I need to steal my husband for a moment. Lady Pembroke wants to introduce us to the vicar. In the carriage ride home, Adrian said, You're good at that. At what? People, conversation, managing social situations. Lillian looked out the window at the dark countryside rolling past. It's not difficult. You just have to actually care about what people are saying. I find most of what people say profoundly uninteresting. Yes, she said quietly. I've noticed. Something in her tone made him glance over, but her expression was unreadable in the shadows. By the 3rd month, they'd settled into a rhythm. Adrian spent his days managing the estate, reviewing contracts, meeting with tenants and business partners. Lillian ran the household, planned menus, oversaw repairs, organized the servants. They existed in parallel, efficient, separate, functional. Adrian told himself this was ideal, but small things started needling at him. Nothing he could name exactly, just awareness. Like the way Lillian always put a fresh vase of flowers in the breakfast room. Not because he'd asked, he hadn't, but because she'd noticed he ate there most mornings and the room faced east, so the light was better. Or how she'd quietly rearranged his study bookshelves by topic instead of size, making everything easier to find. Or the afternoon he'd come back from a particularly frustrating meeting with a neighboring landowner and found his favorite whiskey already poured in the library, with a plate of the cook's better biscuits beside it. When he asked Preston about it later, the steward said carefully, Her Grace asked Cook what you preferred, sir. Said she noticed you'd had a difficult week. Adrian frowned. She doesn't need to do that. No, sir. I believe she wanted to. He didn't know what to do with that information, so he did nothing. 4 months in, Lillian started spending time in the conservatory. Adrian discovered this by accident, passing through on his way to the estate office early one morning. He heard music, piano, floating through the glass doors. He paused. It wasn't showy playing, not the performative, technically perfect pieces young ladies learn to impress potential husbands. This was different, slower, something melancholy and Russian he didn't recognize. He found himself pushing the door open quietly. Lillian sat at the old piano, his mother's piano, which he'd kept maintained but never touched, completely absorbed. Her fingers moved across the keys like she was having a conversation with the instrument, drawing out phrases that felt almost like questions, waiting for answers. She didn't notice him. Adrian watched for nearly a minute, something uncomfortable stirring in his chest. The early light caught the copper in her hair. Her expression was completely unguarded, concentrated, a little sad, entirely present. This was what she looked like when no one was watching, when she wasn't performing the role of duchess, or polite wife, or household manager, just Lillian. The piece ended. Silence settled. That was beautiful. She startled, turning quickly. Oh, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry, did I wake you? No, I was already up. He stayed in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. I didn't know you played. You never asked. She said it without accusation, just fact. What was that piece? Rachmaninoff, Prelude in G minor. She touched the keys gently, not pressing them. My mother used to play it. She died when I was 15. Sometimes playing her favorite pieces makes me feel close to her. Adrian didn't know what to say to that. The vulnerability in her voice made his chest tight. You can play whenever you like, he managed finally. The conservatory is yours. Thank you. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I should let you get to work. He left feeling strangely off balance. Month 5 brought their first real conflict. Adrian came home late from a trip to the southern estates to find the house in chaos. Servants rushing around, unfamiliar voices in the dining room, laughter echoing through halls that were usually library quiet. He found Preston in the entry hall looking harassed. What's going on? Her Grace's family is visiting, sir. Her father, sister, and 2 cousins. They arrived this afternoon. Adrian's jaw tightened. For how long? A week, I believe. A week. Of noise. Of strangers in his space. Of disruption. He found Lillian in the drawing room with her family, her father telling some animated story, her sister Clara laughing, 2 younger cousins playing cards in the corner. Adrian, Lillian stood immediately, genuine warmth in her smile. You're back. Come meet everyone properly. Miss Hartwell. Lillian, please, her father interrupted with a broad grin. We're family now. Adrian endured introductions, polite questions about his trip, attempts to draw him into conversation. He answered minimally, his discomfort growing with every passing minute. Finally, he caught Lillian's eye and nodded toward the hall. She excused herself and followed him out. I wasn't informed of this visit, Adrian said quietly, keeping his voice controlled. I mentioned it at breakfast 3 days ago. No, you didn't. I did. You were reading correspondence. You said, He vaguely remembered that, her voice in the background while he scanned a letter from his solicitor. That is an agreement, Lillian. A week of house guests requires actual discussion. They're my family, Adrian, not house guests. This is my home. It's my home too. Her voice stayed level, but something sharpened in her eyes. I've been here 5 months. I've adapted to your schedule, your preferences, your need for silence and solitude. I haven't asked for anything, but I'm allowed to have my family visit. I'm not saying they can't visit. I'm saying you should have asked. Why? So you could say no? She crossed her arms. You don't get to seal me off from everyone I care about because you've decided feelings are inconvenient. The words hit harder than they should have. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it? Lillian's calm was cracking, real emotion bleeding through. You've made this beautiful prison, Adrian, comfortable, well-appointed, perfectly managed, but it's still a prison. I'm trying to live here. Actually live, not just exist. Silence. Adrian felt anger rising. Clean, simple anger that was easier than whatever complicated thing was churning under it. 1 week, he said flatly. After that, we discuss any future visits in advance. Agreed? Agreed. Her voice had gone cold. Professional. The warmth from minutes ago completely extinguished. She returned to her family without another word. Adrian retreated to his study and tried to work. But he couldn't focus. Couldn't stop hearing her voice. You've made this beautiful prison. That wasn't fair. He'd given her everything. Comfort, status, freedom to manage her own time. Except, a small voice whispered, anything that actually matters. He crushed the thought immediately and poured himself a drink. The week was torture. Noise at breakfast. Conversation at dinner. Clara constantly asking him questions about the estate. Lillian's cousins racing through the halls, her father trying to engage him in discussions about military strategy or politics. Adrian endured it with gritted teeth, counting down the days. But he noticed things too, like how Lillian came alive around her family. Laughed more, talked more, touched people casually. Her sister's shoulder, her father's arm, in ways she never touched him. Like she was a completely different person. Warmer, younger, unguarded. On the 5th night, he passed the music room and heard multiple voices singing, badly, enthusiastically, completely off key. Lillian was at the piano, her sister beside her, everyone laughing. The last time he'd heard laughter in this house, his mother had been alive. He kept walking. On the morning they left, Lillian's father pulled Adrian aside. "Thank you for hosting us, son. I know it wasn't easy for you." "It's fine." "No, it's not." The older man's eyes were kind but direct. "I know what kind of man you are, Adrian. Disciplined, controlled. My daughter knew that when she married you, but she's not like you. She needs warmth, connection. I hope you'll remember that." Adrian had no response. After they left, the house settled back into its usual silence. He found Lillian in the conservatory that evening, sitting at the piano but not playing. Just sitting, staring at nothing. "They're good people," Adrian offered awkwardly. "Your family. I know. You can invite them again, just with more notice." "Thank you." Her voice was hollow. He hesitated. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." She stood, smoothed her skirts. "If you'll excuse me, I should check on dinner preparations." She left before he could say anything else. Month 7. The distance between them widened so gradually, Adrian almost didn't notice. Lillian stopped initiating conversations, stopped putting flowers in the breakfast room, stopped appearing with whiskey after his difficult days. She was still perfectly polite, still managed the household flawlessly, still attended necessary social functions with grace. But something fundamental had shifted. She stopped trying. Adrian told himself this was fine. Easier, even. This was closer to what he'd wanted from the beginning, a functional arrangement without emotional complications. But the house felt different, emptier. He started noticing her absence instead of her presence. The breakfast room felt darker, the library felt colder. The silence that had once been comfortable now pressed against his ears. One night, he woke at 2 a.m. and couldn't fall back asleep. He went downstairs for a book and past Lillian's chambers. Light showed under the door. He heard soft sounds, not crying exactly, but something close. He raised his hand to knock, hesitated, lowered it again. What would he even say? He went back to his own room and stared at the ceiling until dawn. Ishet, month 9. They barely spoke anymore. Lillian took her breakfast in her room. Dinners were silent affairs. 20 minutes of efficient eating, then polite excuses to leave. She stopped attending estate meetings, stopped asking about his work, stopped existing in any space he occupied for longer than necessary. The servants noticed. Of course they noticed. The whispers started. The invisible Duchess, they called her. The ghost of Blackthorn Manor. Adrian's business partners asked carefully if everything was well at home. "Fine," he said. "Everything's fine." But he'd started seeing Lillian differently in public, noticing how other men looked at her with interest, appreciation, warmth. At a holiday dinner, Lord Hastings spent 20 minutes in animated conversation with her about literature. Lillian laughed at something he said, her whole face lighting up. Adrian felt something twist in his chest, sharp, unpleasant. When they got home, he said, Lord Hastings seemed very attentive. "He's an interesting conversationalist." Lillian didn't look at him, already removing her jewelry. "He's known for being interested in more than conversation." Now she looked at him. "Are you implying something?" "I'm observing that he was inappropriate." "He was kind. There's a difference." She set down her earrings with deliberate care. "Though I wouldn't expect you to know that." "Meaning?" "Meaning you don't know the first thing about kindness, Adrian. Or warmth. Or basic human connection. You've made that abundantly clear." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Lillian's voice cracked, real emotion bleeding through for the first time in months. "You want to talk about fair? I came here with hope. I tried. I tried so hard. And you gave me nothing. Not cruelty. I could have fought cruelty. Just nothing. Do you have any idea what that does to a person?" Adrian felt his own walls slamming up. "I gave you exactly what I promised. Security, respect, freedom. You gave me a cage." Her voice broke. "A beautiful, comfortable cage with everything except the one thing that matters." "Which is what?" "You." The word tore out of her. "Some version of you that actually exists. Not this perfectly controlled ghost who moves through life like he's already dead." The words hit like a physical blow. Adrian stood frozen, every defense mechanism screaming at him to shut this down, retreat, rebuild the walls. I don't know what you want from me, he said finally, his voice flat. Lillian looked at him for a long moment. Something in her expression shifted, not anger anymore. Something worse, resignation. No, she said quietly. You really don't. She turned and went to her chambers. The door closed with a soft click. Adrian stood in the hallway, his heart pounding, that sharp feeling in his chest spreading like ice water through his veins. He recognized it suddenly, the thing he'd been avoiding his whole adult life. Pain. He'd promised himself he'd never feel this, never be vulnerable, never let anyone close enough to hurt him. But Lillian had gotten close anyway. Not through force or manipulation, just by being consistently, stubbornly present. By trying when he gave her nothing, by caring when he'd told her not to. And now she'd stopped. And it hurt worse than anything he could remember. Adrian went to his study, poured a drink, and stared at nothing until the sky started to lighten. Sound. Month 11. Lillian made her decision on a Tuesday morning. Adrian was in his study when Preston knocked softly. Your Grace? Her Grace would like to speak with you. Something in the steward's voice made Adrian look up sharply. Now? She's in the drawing room. Adrian found her standing by the window, dressed for travel. 2 trunks sat by the door. What's this? I'm leaving. Her voice was calm, final. Leaving? For my father's house. Indefinitely. The floor seemed to tilt. What are you talking about? I can't do this anymore, Adrian. She turned to face him. This marriage, this life, this slow suffocation. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. For the first time in months. She pulled off her wedding ring, slowly, deliberately, and set it on the side table. You don't want a wife. You want a well-trained servant who knows not to expect anything human from you. I can't be that person anymore. Lillian, I tried. You know I tried. And you gave me nothing. Not anger, not cruelty, just absence. Do you know what that does? It makes you doubt your own existence. I started wondering if I was even real, or just some ghost haunting your perfect, empty house. That's not... I never wanted... Adrian couldn't form coherent sentences. The control he'd maintained for months was fracturing. I know you didn't want this. Her voice softened slightly. You were honest about that from the beginning, but I thought maybe if I was patient, if I didn't push, you'd eventually let me in. Just a little. Enough to build something real. I gave you everything I could. You gave me everything except yourself. She picked up her gloves. I deserve more than that, even if you don't think you do. Where will you go? I told you, my father's house. People will talk. Scandal. Let them talk. She pulled on her gloves with sharp, precise movements. I've spent 11 months living for your comfort, your preferences, your need for perfect control. I'm done. She started toward the door. Lillian, wait. She paused. Didn't turn around. Adrian's mind was screaming at him to say something. Do something. Fix this. But every word died in his throat. Every emotion he'd spent years suppressing was crashing through him at once, and he had no idea how to navigate it. Please, he managed finally. The word felt rusty. Please, what, Adrian? Now she did turn, and her eyes were full of something that looked like grief. Please stay in this beautiful prison. Please keep pretending this is enough. Please stop wanting things you can't give. I don't know how. I know you don't. Her voice cracked. That's the problem. You're so terrified of feeling anything that you've forgotten how to be human. And I can't teach you. I tried, but I can't save someone who won't even admit he's drowning. The carriage was waiting outside. Servants loaded her trunks with downcast eyes. Lillian paused at the door one last time. I'm not doing this to hurt you, she said quietly. I'm doing this to survive. I hope someday you understand the difference. Then she was gone. Adrian stood in the empty drawing room, staring at her wedding ring on the table. The house was silent again. Perfect. Controlled. Exactly what he'd wanted. And for the first time in his carefully constructed life, Adrian Blackthorne felt everything he'd been running from. Loss, regret, fear, and something that might have been the beginning of understanding. Too late. Far too late. But undeniable. The ring sat on the table for 3 days. Adrian kept meaning to put it away, back in the family vault where it belonged, tucked into velvet beside the other blackthorn heirlooms that marked marriages both successful and disastrous. But every time he reached for it, his hand stopped midair. He told himself it was practical. Lillian might come back for it. She'd want it returned properly.
He was lying to himself. He knew that. But lying was easier than admitting what the ring actually represented. Evidence, proof that she'd been here, that the marriage had been real, even if he'd treated it like a business contract that had simply expired. Preston found him in the drawing room on the fourth morning, standing in the exact spot where Lillian had removed the ring. "Your Grace, the tenants are waiting. The quarterly reviews, cancel them."
Preston's eyebrows rose microscopically. "Sir, these meetings have been scheduled for—" "I said cancel them." Adrian's voice came out harsher than intended. He forced himself to moderate. "Reschedule for next week. Tell them something came up." "Of course, sir." The steward retreated, but not before Adrian caught the look, concern mixed with something that might have been pity. He hated that look. Adrian returned to his study and tried to work. The contracts in front of him blurred. Numbers refused to add up correctly. He read the same paragraph 4 times and retained nothing. His mind kept circling back to the same moment, Lillian standing by the window, pulling off her ring with that terrible, calm finality. "You're so terrified of feeling anything that you've forgotten how to be human." The accusation had burrowed under his skin like a splinter. He wanted to dismiss it as dramatic, unfair, the emotional outburst of someone who'd never understood what he'd been trying to build here. Except she'd stayed for 11 months, tried for 11 months, and he'd given her nothing, not because he was cruel. He'd never been cruel. Because he was scared. The realization hit him like cold water. He'd spent so long thinking of himself as disciplined, controlled, rational. But what if that had all been elaborate camouflage for simple, pathetic cowardice? His father's face surfaced in his memory, gaunt, hollow-eyed, staring at nothing after his mother died. The estate crumbling around them while the great Duke Blackthorn slowly ceased to exist. Adrian had been 14 when he found his father in the conservatory at 3 in the morning, just sitting in his mother's chair, tears running silently down his face. "Father?" No response. Like Adrian wasn't even there. That image had carved itself into his brain. The lesson had been simple. This is what love does. This is what caring costs. So he'd armored himself, built walls so high nothing could reach him. And it had worked perfectly. Until Lillian. Adrian stood abruptly, the chair scraping loud in the silent room. He needed air, movement, anything to stop the thoughts circling like vultures. He found himself in the conservatory without consciously choosing to go there. The piano sat silent. Lillian's sheet music was still on the stand. Rachmaninoff, the piece she'd said reminded her of her mother. Adrian touched the keys lightly. They were cold. When was the last time he'd heard her play? Weeks ago. Maybe a month. She'd stopped coming here when she'd stopped trying with him. He'd noticed. Of course he'd noticed. He noticed everything about her, even when he pretended not to. The way she hummed while arranging flowers. The specific tea she preferred at breakfast. Earl Grey with honey, never sugar. How she tilted her head slightly when listening to someone, really listening, making them feel heard in a way Adrian never could. How she'd looked at him those first few months. With hope. With warmth. Like maybe, possibly, he could be more than the cold machine he'd presented. And he'd extinguished that hope methodically, day by day, with perfect politeness and absolute emptiness. "I deserve more than that, even if you don't think you do." Did he think he deserved more? Adrian didn't know. He'd never asked the question. Deserving hadn't been part of the equation. Only safety, control, survival. But survival wasn't the same as living. Lillian had tried to tell him that. He just hadn't been listening. A knock interrupted his spiral. "Your Grace?" Preston again, looking uncomfortable. "Lord Hastings is here to see you." Everything in Adrian went still. "Hastings?" "Yes, sir. He says it's important." Adrian's jaw tightened. Hastings, the man who'd made Lillian laugh at that dinner, who'd looked at her with open appreciation while Adrian watched and felt that sharp, ugly twist in his chest. "Show him to the library." Hastings was younger than Adrian by a few years, sandy-haired and affable in that easy way some men had, the kind who moved through the world assuming they'd be welcomed. He stood when Adrian entered, offering a broad smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Blackthorn, thank you for seeing me. Hastings. Adrian didn't sit. What can I do for you?
Actually, I'm here about what I can do for you. Hastings pulled an envelope from his jacket. I've been asked to deliver this. Adrian took it. His name was written on the front in unfamiliar handwriting, not Lillian's. He broke the seal and scanned the contents.
It was from Lillian's father. Brief, formal, informing Adrian that Lillian was staying with them indefinitely and requesting that her personal belongings be sent to the Hartwell estate. I see. Adrian folded the letter with careful precision, his face giving away nothing. You're playing courier now? I happen to be heading this direction. Colonel Hartwell asked if I'd mind. Hastings paused. I should tell you, Blackthorn, Lillian's been through hell. Whatever happened between you two, she's hurting. The presumption of it, this man, this near stranger speaking about his wife, made anger flare hot and immediate. My marriage is none of your concern. No, you're right. Hastings held his gaze steadily. But Lillian's well-being is. She's a friend, a good one. And I don't like seeing good people destroyed by... He stopped himself. By what? Adrian's voice went dangerously quiet. By people who don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Adrian felt control slipping. Every carefully maintained wall was cracking, and underneath was something hot and chaotic he didn't recognize. Jealousy. Rage. Fear. Get out! Blackthorn, get out of my house, now! Hastings studied him for a long moment, something like pity crossing his face. Then he shook his head slowly. You know what's tragic? I think you actually care. You're just too damaged to admit it. He left before Adrian could respond. Adrian stood alone in the library, the letter crinkling in his fist, his heart hammering against his ribs. Too damaged. The phrase echoed, mocked. He wanted to throw something, wanted to ride to the Hartwell estate and demand Lillian come home, wanted to go back in time and be different, better, someone capable of giving her what she needed. Instead, he did what he always did. Went to his study, poured a drink, tried to work. The numbers still wouldn't add up. 3 weeks passed. Adrian functioned. Barely. He met with tenants, reviewed contracts, managed the estate. On the surface, everything was fine. Perfectly fine. Underneath, something was unraveling. He started waking at odd hours, his mind racing. Started snapping at servants for minor infractions. Started drinking more than he should. The house felt wrong, too quiet, too empty. Like something vital had been removed and now the whole structure was slowly collapsing inward. Preston watched him with increasing concern, but said nothing. The housekeeper mentioned gently that perhaps his grace should eat more regularly. The cook started leaving covered dishes in his study that Adrian mostly ignored. He lost weight, couldn't focus, kept catching himself listening for sounds that didn't come. Footsteps in the hall, piano music from the conservatory, Lillian's voice asking about his day. At night, he'd stand outside her chambers and stare at the closed door. Once, he pushed it open and went inside. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. The bed made. Her dressing table cleared, the wardrobe empty except for a few dresses she must have deemed not worth taking. Adrian sat on the edge of her bed and tried to remember what it felt like when she was here. When the house felt lived in instead of like a mausoleum. He couldn't. The memories were there. Breakfasts where she'd tried to make conversation, dinners where she'd smiled politely at his silence, moments where she'd reached out and he'd pulled back. But he couldn't access the feeling, couldn't understand what it had been like to have her here and take it completely for granted. You've made this beautiful prison. He understood now, saw it clearly. Every perfectly maintained room, every silent, efficient routine, every carefully controlled interaction. He'd built this prison brick by brick, and Lillian had been trapped inside it with him. The difference was, she'd finally found the courage to leave, and he was still here, locked in, alone. 1 month after Lillian left, Adrian received an invitation. The Pembrokes were hosting their annual winter ball. Attendance was expected. He'd skipped it the previous year. Had Lillian attended alone? He couldn't remember. Probably. She'd been good at maintaining appearances. Adrian almost declined, but something, pride maybe, or the stubborn refusal to admit defeat, made him accept. He arrived late, hoping to minimize the social obligations. The ballroom was crowded, glittering with candlelight and expensive dresses and the hum of 100 conversations. Adrian moved through it mechanically, nodding to acquaintances, deflecting questions about Lillian's absence with vague mentions of her visiting family. No one believed him. He could see it in their eyes, the curiosity, the judgment, the speculation. The Duke of Blackthorn's wife left him. Can you imagine? He was getting a drink when he saw her. Lillian. She was across the room wearing deep blue silk that made her skin glow. Her hair was styled differently, looser, softer. She was laughing at something Clara said, her whole face animated. And next to her, leaning in with obvious interest, was Lord Hastings. Everything in Adrian's chest seized. He watched, frozen, as Hastings said something that made Lillian laugh again. Watched him touch her elbow lightly. Familiar, comfortable. Watched her smile up at him with the kind of warmth she used to direct at Adrian before he'd killed it through sheer neglect. The jealousy that tore through him was so intense it physically hurt. Adrian set down his drink before he shattered the glass. He needed to leave, now, before he did something stupid, but his feet wouldn't move. Hastings was leaning closer now, saying something directly into Lillian's ear. She blushed, actually blushed. Adrian started walking without conscious decision, across the ballroom, past the dancers, directly toward them. Lillian saw him coming. Something flashed in her eyes. Surprise, wariness, something else he couldn't name. Adrian. Her voice was carefully neutral. Lillian. He looked at Hastings. I need to speak with my wife, privately. I don't think... Hastings started. It wasn't a request. Lillian touched Hastings' arm gently. It's fine. I'll find you later. She followed Adrian to a small sitting room off the main hall. Empty, quiet. The noise of the ball muffled behind thick doors. They stood facing each other. Adrian's mind was racing, trying to organize the chaos of things he wanted to say. What are you doing here? Lillian asked finally. I was invited. That's not what I meant. She crossed her arms. What do you want, Adrian? What did he want? Everything, nothing, a chance to go back and be different. Are you with him? Hastings? Her eyebrows rose. That's none of your business. You're still my wife. Am I? Her voice was sharp now. Because last I checked, you wanted a wife in name only. A convenient arrangement. Well, congratulations. That's what you have. That's not... Adrian stopped, frustrated. I saw how he was looking at you. He was looking at me like someone who actually enjoys my company. Imagine that. The barb landed. Adrian felt anger rising, not at her, at himself, at this entire impossible situation. You've been gone a month. I've been surviving a month. There's a difference. This is ridiculous. You can't just... Can't what? Leave. I already did. Can't move on. Watch me. Lillian's composure was cracking. You don't get to do this, Adrian. You don't get to ignore me for almost a year and then suddenly care when someone else pays attention. That's not what... He couldn't find the words. Everything he wanted to say felt inadequate. Lillian shook her head slowly. You know what I realized after I left? I spent 11 months trying to understand you, trying to find some way to reach you, making excuses for why you couldn't give me basic human warmth, and I was exhausted. I know I wasn't... No, you don't know. Her voice broke slightly. You have no idea what it's like to live with someone and feel completely alone, to try so hard and get nothing back, to start wondering if maybe you're the problem, if maybe you're asking too much by wanting to be seen. You're not the problem. The words came out rough. Then what is, Adrian? She stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. Tell me. Because I spent 11 months trying to figure it out, and all I got was silence. Adrian felt like he was drowning. Everything he'd kept locked down for years was surging up at once, and he had no idea how to navigate it. My father died loving my mother so much it destroyed him. The confession tore out of him. I was 14. I watched him disintegrate. The estate fell apart. Everything fell apart. And I swore I would never let that happen to me. Lillian went very still. I thought if I didn't let myself care, I'd be safe, strong, in control. Adrian's voice was shaking now. But you were right. I wasn't strong. I was terrified. And I hurt you because I was too much of a coward to risk feeling anything. Silence stretched between them. You're telling me this now? Lillian's voice was barely a whisper. After I left? After I spent months breaking myself trying to reach you? I know, it's too late. She said it with finality. It's too late, Adrian. It doesn't have to be. Yes, it does. Tears were sliding down her face now, but her voice stayed steady. Because even if you figured this out, even if you mean it, I can't go back to that house. I can't go back to being invisible while you decide whether or not I'm worth the risk. You are. You were always, I don't believe you. The words were quiet, but devastating. And more than that, I don't trust you. You had 11 months to let me in. 11 months of me trying, and you gave me nothing until I left. That's not love, Adrian. That's panic at losing possession. The accusation stung because part of it was true. He hadn't realized what he had until it was gone. But it wasn't just possession. It couldn't be. The way he felt right now, like his chest was caving in, like he couldn't breathe properly, that was more than wounded pride. What about Hastings? The question came out sharper than intended. What about him? Are you interested in him? Lillian's laugh was bitter. You really don't understand, do you? Whether or not I'm interested in Hastings isn't the point. The point is I deserve someone who's interested in me, who wants to know me, who doesn't treat basic emotional availability like it's a threat. I want to know you. Now you do. Where was that want for the past year? Adrian had no answer. Lillian wiped her eyes with sharp, angry gestures. I need to go back. People will notice. Lillian, please. Stop. She held up a hand. Just stop. I can't do this right now. She turned toward the door. I'll fight for you. Adrian's voice came out raw. I know I have no right to ask, but I'm not giving up. I'll prove I can be different. Lillian paused, her hand on the doorknob. She didn't turn around. You shouldn't have to fight for something you already had and threw away. Her voice was exhausted. That's the part you still don't understand. She left. Adrian stood alone in the empty room, his heart hammering, that sharp pain in his chest spreading until it felt like it might crack him open. He'd thought the worst moment was watching her leave the house a month ago. He'd been wrong. The worst moment was right now, realizing he'd lost her not through tragedy or fate or forces beyond his control, but through his own deliberate, careful, cowardly choices. And the real tragedy, the thing that made it unbearable, was that he finally understood what he'd destroyed. Not a convenient arrangement, not a practical partnership, but a real marriage, with a real woman who'd cared about him despite every reason not to, and she'd been right there, for 11 months, trying, while he'd been too scared to try back. Adrian returned to the ballroom in time to see Lillian dancing with Hastings. She was smiling, talking, looking almost happy, and Adrian Blackthorne, Duke of the Northern Frontier, master of 15,000 acres and a fortune most men would kill for, stood in the shadows and felt absolutely powerless. Because the one thing he actually wanted, the one thing that mattered, he'd already lost. And he had no idea how to get it back. Adrian left the ball without saying goodbye to anyone. The carriage ride back to Blackthorne Manor stretched endlessly, every mile a fresh reminder of what he'd just witnessed. Lillian in Hastings' arms, Lillian laughing, Lillian looking lighter, freer than she'd ever looked in their home. When he finally arrived, the house loomed dark and accusatory. Preston met him at the door, took one look at his face, and wisely said nothing. Adrian went straight to the study, poured whiskey with shaking hands, and drained it in 2 swallows, then poured another. He'd meant what he said. He would fight for her, had to fight for her, because the alternative, living the rest of his life in this hollow shell of an existence, was unbearable. But how did you fight for something when you didn't know the rules? When every instinct you'd honed for survival was exactly wrong for what you needed now? Adrian sat at his desk and pulled out paper. Started writing. Lillian, he stopped, crossed it out, started again. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. Crossed out. Too formal. Too much like a contract. He tried 6 more times. Every attempt sounded either pathetic or entitled or completely inadequate. Finally, he crumpled the last sheet and threw it across the room. Words on paper weren't going to fix this. He needed action, needed to prove he could be different. But how? The question haunted him through the night. When dawn broke gray and cold over the moors, Adrian was still sitting at his desk, no closer to an answer. Preston knocked around 8. Your Grace, Lord Pembroke is here to see you. Adrian's head snapped up. Pembroke, now? He says it's urgent. Pembroke was shown in looking uncomfortable, a round, affable man who rarely appeared uncomfortable about anything. Blackthorn, apologies for the early hour. What's happened? I'm not entirely sure how to say this diplomatically, so I'll just be direct. Pembroke cleared his throat. There's talk about you and the Duchess, about last night. Adrian's jaw tightened. What kind of talk? People saw you pull her aside, saw her return looking upset. And then Hastings was with her the rest of the evening, very attentive. Pembroke shifted his weight. The gossip is that you're estranged, that she left you, that Hastings is courting her openly. She's still my wife. Technically, yes. But Blackthorn, if you don't do something, publicly, visibly, the narrative is going to cement. And once society decides you've been cast aside, they'll treat the Duchess as available. Hastings certainly seems to think she is. Rage flared hot and immediate. Hastings can think whatever he wants. It doesn't change facts. Facts matter less than perception. You know that. Pembroke's voice gentled slightly. Look, I don't know what happened between you two, but if you want any chance of repairing this, you need to act, soon, decisively. Because right now you look like a man who drove his wife away through neglect and is too proud to admit it. The accuracy of the assessment stung. What would you suggest? Court her, publicly. Show everyone, show her that you value what you have. I don't know how to do that. Pembroke blinked. You don't know how to court your own wife? I never courted her to begin with. It was an arrangement. The admission tasted bitter. Well, then it's time you learned. Pembroke stood. Flowers, letters, public attention, the things young men do when they're trying to win someone. Except in your case, you're trying to win her back, which is harder, but not impossible. After Pembroke left, Adrian sat with the advice. Court her. Show her he'd changed. Prove through action what words couldn't convey. It sounded simple. Terrifying, but simple. He called for Preston. I need you to find out where the Duchess is staying, what her schedule is, where she goes, who she sees. Preston's eyebrows rose slightly. Sir, that sounds rather like spying. I know. I don't care. I need information. Might I suggest, Your Grace, that simply asking the Duchess directly would be more appropriate? She won't talk to me. Have you tried? Adrian glared. Preston held his gaze steadily, and after a moment Adrian looked away. Just get me the information. Within 2 days, Preston reported back. Lillian was staying at her father's estate, about 40 miles south. She visited the village most mornings, attended church on Sundays, had tea with friends twice a week. Hastings had called on her 3 times. 3 times in 1 week. The jealousy that information sparked was caustic. Adrian made a decision. If he was going to do this, really do this, he needed help. Someone who understood how normal people conducted relationships. Someone like Lillian's sister. He rode to the Hartwell estate unannounced, arriving mid-morning when he knew Lillian would be out. Clara answered the door herself, her eyes widening in surprise. Your Grace, is something wrong? I need to speak with you, please. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Father's in his study. Should I? Just you. If you're willing. They sat in a small parlor, Clara perched on the edge of a chair, looking wary but curious. How is she? Adrian asked. Honestly, better than when she was with you. Clara's bluntness was refreshing. She's sleeping again, eating, smiling. You should see that as good news, even if it stings. It did sting, viciously. I need your help. My help? With what? With winning her back. The words felt awkward, unfamiliar. I don't know how. I wasn't raised to understand this. Clara studied him for a long moment. Why now? Why do you care now when you didn't for a year? I did care. Adrian struggled. I didn't know how to show it. I was afraid. Of what? Of turning into my father. Of caring so much that losing her would destroy me. He forced himself to meet Clara's eyes. But I lost her anyway. And it's destroying me regardless. So the fear was pointless. All it did was guarantee the outcome I was trying to avoid.
Clara's expression softened slightly. That's the most honest thing I've ever heard you say. I'm trying to be better. I need to be better, but I don't know where to start.
Start by understanding what Lillian actually wants. Not what you think she wants, or what's practical. What she needs to be happy.
How do I find that out?
You ask her, you listen, you pay attention.
Clara leaned forward.
Lillian's not complicated, Adrian. She just wanted to be seen, to matter to you. Every small thing she did, the flowers, the music, trying to make the house feel like a home, those weren't obligations. They were gifts. And you treated them like background noise. The assessment was damning because it was completely accurate. I see that now. Seeing it isn't enough. You have to change. Actually change, not just perform change until she comes back. Clara's voice turned fierce. My sister deserves better than a man who only values her when someone else shows interest. If you can't be that man consistently, leave her alone. Let her find someone who can. I can be that man. Prove it. Not to me, to her. And be warned, Adrian, Lillian's not the same woman who left your house. She's stronger now, harder to reach. You hurt her badly enough that she built walls of her own. The irony wasn't lost on him. Will you help me? Clara was quiet for a long time. Then, I'll tell you what I know, but I won't lie to her or manipulate her on your behalf. If you want Lillian back, you have to earn it honestly. I understand. Over the next hour, Clara told him things he should have learned months ago. That Lillian loved poetry, Wordsworth especially, the Romantic naturalists. That she missed playing piano but had stopped because the conservatory reminded her of happier times. That she'd tried to talk to him about her mother's death, and he'd changed the subject because he'd been uncomfortable.
She thought you didn't care, Clara said quietly. But I think you cared too much and didn't know how to handle it.
I didn't. Then learn, fast, because Hastings is persistent and Lillian's lonely. Adrian left the Hartwell estate with a plan forming. Not a perfect plan. He had no idea if it would work, but it was something. First step, he wrote to Lillian. Not a long letter. Clara had warned him against overwhelming her with sudden emotion. Just a few lines. Lillian, I know I have no right to ask for your time, but I'm asking anyway. Will you meet me? There's something I need to show you. Please. Adrian. He sent it by messenger and waited. The response came 2 days later. Brief, cool. Thursday, 2 o'clock. The tea house in Millbrook Village. 1 hour, no more. L. It was something, a crack in the wall. Adrian spent the next 3 days in a state of controlled panic. He rode to the village, found the tea house, a small, pleasant place with lace curtains and good light. He reserved a private table. Then he went to the conservatory and did something he hadn't done since his mother died. He sat at the piano and tried to play. His fingers were stiff, unpracticed. The notes came out halting and wrong, but he kept trying, pulling out the Rachmaninoff sheet music Lillian had left behind, working through it measure by painful measure. Preston found him there past midnight. Your Grace, you should rest. I need to learn this. Why? Because it mattered to her. And I never asked why. I never asked about anything that mattered to her. Adrian's fingers stumbled over a difficult passage. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Thursday arrived cold and bright. Adrian rode to Millbrook early, his heart hammering. He dressed carefully, not the formal ducal armor he usually wore, but simpler clothes, more approachable. He arrived at the tea house 15 minutes early and waited. Lillian walked in precisely at 2 o'clock. She looked different, thinner, maybe. Her dress was a soft gray that brought out her eyes. She'd always been pretty, but now there was something else, a guardedness that made her seem untouchable. She sat across from him without ceremony. Adrian, thank you for coming. I almost didn't. She removed her gloves with precise movements. But curiosity got the better of me. A server appeared. Lillian ordered tea. Adrian ordered coffee he wouldn't drink. Silence stretched between them. You said you had something to show me, Lillian prompted finally. I do. But first, I need to say something. Adrian forced himself to meet her eyes. I've been learning about you. Things I should have known all along. Her expression didn't change. Learning about me? From Clara. From paying attention. He pulled a small book from his coat pocket, a volume of Wordsworth's poetry, worn and well-loved. I know you love the romantic poets, that you read this by your mother's bedside when she was sick. Lillian went very still. Where did you get that? Clara told me which edition you preferred. I found a copy. She didn't reach for it. Why? Because I want to know you. Really know you. Not the version I invented in my head. The practical, sensible wife who wouldn't demand too much. But you. The real person. You had 11 months to do that. I know, and I wasted them. Adrian set the book on the table between them. I'm not going to waste any more time. If you'll give me a chance. I gave you chances. Dozens of them. I know. I tried everything, Adrian, everything I could think of, and you gave me nothing. Her voice was steady, but pain bled through. Why should I believe this is different? Because I'm different. Or trying to be. He pulled out another item, sheet music, the Rachmaninoff prelude. I've been learning to play this. Her eyes widened slightly. You don't play piano. I do now. Badly. But I'm trying. He met her gaze. You told me once that playing your mother's favorite pieces made you feel close to her. I want to understand that. I want to understand what music means to you, what memories you carry, what makes you who you are. Lillian's composure cracked slightly. This is manipulation. No, it's effort. There's a difference. Is there? Because it feels like you're just trying to win me back so you don't look like a failure. The accusation landed hard. Is that what you think? That this is about pride? What else would it be? You didn't care when I was there. You only started caring when I left. That's not... Adrian stopped himself. Took a breath. You're partially right. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. But that doesn't mean the caring isn't real. How convenient for you. The bitterness in her voice cut deep. I saw you with Hastings, Adrian said quietly. At the ball. You looked happy. I was happy. He's kind, attentive, actually interested in what I have to say. Are you in love with him? That's none of your business. You're my wife. Am I? Lillian's eyes flashed. Because you made it very clear that our marriage was a business arrangement. Why should I honor those terms when you've broken every promise that actually mattered? What promises did I break? To be a partner. To build something together. You promised me a life, Adrian. Not luxury or status. Those were bonuses. You promised me a life, and what I got was a beautiful mausoleum where I slowly suffocated. Her voice broke on the last word. Adrian felt something crumble in his chest. I know, and I can't undo that, but I can try to be better going forward, if you'll let me. Why should I? Because I love you. The words fell into the space between them like stones into water. Lillian went absolutely still. What? I love you. I think I have for months. I just didn't recognize it because I've spent 15 years training myself not to feel anything. Adrian's voice was shaking now. But I feel it every day. It's like drowning and burning at the same time, and I have no idea how to manage it except to tell you the truth. You don't love me. Her voice was hollow. You love the idea of not losing. That's different. No, I love you. The way you hum while arranging flowers. The way you tilt your head when you're really listening, the way you tried so hard to make that house a home, even though I gave you nothing to work with. He leaned forward. I love that you're stubborn enough to leave when you deserved better, that you rebuilt yourself when I broke you down, that you're sitting here giving me hell instead of making this easy. Tears were running down Lillian's face now, but her voice stayed steady. You're saying exactly what I wanted to hear a year ago. But it's too late. Why? Because I don't trust you. Because I spent 11 months dying inside while you stayed perfectly controlled. Because the only reason you're saying any of this is I left. You're right about all of it, Adrian's voice cracked. But I'm here anyway. Trying anyway. Because the alternative, living without you, is unbearable. I know I have no right to ask for another chance, but I'm asking. I can't. Lillian stood abruptly. I can't do this. Lillian, please. You hurt me, Adrian, deeply, consistently, for almost a year. She grabbed her gloves with shaking hands. I'm not strong enough to survive that again. I barely survived it the first time. I won't hurt you again. You can't promise that. No one can. She moved toward the door, then paused. I'm glad you're trying to be better. I truly am. But you should do it for yourself, not for me. Because I can't be the reason you change. That's too much weight. What if I want you to be the reason? Then you're still missing the point. She looked back at him, her eyes full of pain and something that might have been pity. Goodbye, Adrian. She left. Adrian sat alone at the table, the untouched tea going cold, that poetry book sitting between the empty chairs like an accusation. He'd laid everything bare, confessed his love, promised to change, and she'd walked away anyway. Because words weren't enough. Words were cheap, easy to say in desperation. She needed proof, needed time, needed him to actually become the man he claimed he could be. And he had no idea if he could do that, if he was even capable of sustained emotional vulnerability. But the alternative, giving up, retreating back to his controlled, empty existence, was unthinkable. Adrian stood, left money on the table, and walked out into the cold afternoon. A decision crystallized as he rode home. If Lillian needed proof, he'd give it to her, not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, through consistent daily action, through becoming someone worthy of her trust, even if it took months, years, even if she never came back. Because she'd been right about one thing. He needed to change for himself, not just for her. He'd spent 15 years being half alive, armored, and isolated. That man had been safe. He'd also been miserable. It was time to risk something different. Over the next 2 weeks, Adrian began systematically dismantling the life he'd built. He started attending church, not because he believed particularly, but because Lillian went there. He sat in the back, didn't approach her, just showed up, consistently. He began taking meals in the village, at the small inn where local families gathered, made conversation, asked about people's lives, actually listened to the answers. He wrote to Lillian every 3 days. Not long letters, Clara had warned him not to overwhelm her. Just brief notes about what he was learning, what he was trying to change. I'm reading Wordsworth. I understand now why you love Tintern Abbey, the way it captures memory and loss and the attempt to find meaning in nature. It reminds me of you. I spoke with the vicar today about the Tennant families. The Henderson's daughter is sick. I'm arranging for a doctor. You would have known that already. You always knew what people needed. I'm still learning the Rachmaninoff. It's harder than I expected. My fingers don't want to cooperate. But I'm trying. He didn't expect responses. Didn't get them. But he kept writing anyway. Word spread through the county that the Duke of Blackthorn was courting his own wife. People found it amusing, touching, or pathetic depending on their disposition. Adrian didn't care. He was learning something fundamental. Vulnerability didn't kill you. It just felt like it would. Every time he sat down to write to Lillian, his instincts screamed at him to stop, protect himself, retreat to safety. He wrote anyway. Every time he showed up at church knowing she'd be there, knowing she might ignore him, his pride demanded he stay away. He went anyway. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done, harder than rebuilding the estate, harder than managing the complex politics of the Northern Territories, because those things were about control. This was about surrender. 3 weeks after the tea house meeting, Adrian received a note. Come to the village square tomorrow at noon. Alone. L. His heart stuttered. He arrived early, nervous as a boy on his first courtship. The square was busy, market day, vendors hawking vegetables and cloth and fresh bread. Lillian appeared at noon exactly, Clara at her side. Adrian. Her voice was neutral. Lillian. Clara. Clara nodded to him, then drifted away to examine a fabric stall, giving them space but staying visible. You've been writing to me, Lillian said. Yes. Why? Because I said I would fight for you. I meant it. She was quiet for a moment, watching the market activity. People are talking. Let them. They're saying you're making a fool of yourself. Are they wrong? A small smile ghosted across her face, there and gone. No, you look ridiculous. The great Duke of Blackthorn writing poetry commentary to his estranged wife. I don't care how I look. I care about you. The smile faded. Adrian, I don't know what you want from me. I want a chance, a real one.
to prove I can be the husband you deserved from the beginning. And if I say no, then I'll respect that. But I'll keep trying to be better anyway, because you were right. I need to change for myself, not just for you. Lillian turned to face him fully. Hastings asked me to marry him. The world tilted. Adrian felt like he'd been punched. What? Yesterday. He said he's been in love with me for years, that he'll petition for our marriage to be annulled on grounds of abandonment, that he'll give me the life I deserve. Adrian couldn't breathe, couldn't think. What did you say? I said I needed time to think about it. Lillian, he's offering me everything you wouldn't: affection, attention, a real partnership. Why shouldn't I say yes? Because you don't love him. How would you know what I feel? Her voice turned sharp. You never bothered to ask before. You're right, I didn't. But I'm asking now. Adrian stepped closer, desperate. Do you love him? She looked away. I could learn to. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Her composure cracked. I spent a year loving you and getting nothing back. Maybe loving someone who loves me back would be easier, safer. Adrian felt something break inside him. You'd marry him for safety? After everything you said about wanting to be seen, to matter, to feel alive? At least with him, I wouldn't be invisible. You were never invisible to me. I saw you. I was just too terrified to admit how much. Lillian's eyes were full of tears now. I can't do this, Adrian. I can't keep having these conversations where you say perfect things and I want to believe you, but I'm too scared I'll end up back in that house feeling like I'm disappearing. Then don't come back to the house. Come somewhere new. We'll start fresh, somewhere without all those ghosts. That's not the solution. What is then? Tell me, because I'll do anything. There isn't a solution. Her voice broke. That's what you don't understand. Some things can't be fixed. You can't unlive a year of neglect. You can't erase how small you made me feel. I know, but we could build something new, something better. Or we could destroy each other trying. She wiped her eyes angrily. Hastings is offering me certainty, peace. Maybe that's enough. It's not. You know it's not. How dare you tell me what I know? Because I know you, Lillian. Finally, really know you. And you don't want safe. You want real. You want messy and complicated and alive. Adrian's voice turned raw. Hastings is offering you a comfortable life. I'm offering you my whole heart, damaged and terrified as it is. You decide which one actually means something. Silence crashed between them. Lillian stared at him, tears streaming down her face, something breaking and reforming in her expression. I need time, she whispered finally. How much time? I don't know, weeks, maybe months. I need to figure out what I actually want. Separate from what you're offering and what Hastings is offering and what everyone expects. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you prove you mean what you say, not through letters or grand gestures, through becoming someone I could trust again, if that's even possible. Adrian nodded slowly. I can do that. Can you? Really? Can you sustain this? This openness, this vulnerability, when it's hard, when I'm not watching, when there's no reward? I don't know, he admitted, but I'm going to try, every day, whether you come back or not. Lillian searched his face for a long moment. I want to believe you. Then believe me. It's not that simple. I know. She stepped back, creating distance. I should go. Lillian, please, no more today. I need to think. She walked away, Clara appearing at her side, both of them disappearing into the market crowd. Adrian stood alone in the square, his heart racing, that sharp pain in his chest now a constant companion. He'd laid everything bare, confessed his love, begged for a chance. And she'd walked away. Again. But this time, something was different. She'd said, maybe. She'd said, I want to believe you. That wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was a crack in the wall, a possibility. And Adrian Blackthorne, who'd spent 15 years avoiding risk, decided that possibility was worth fighting for. Even if it destroyed him, especially if it destroyed him, because at least then he'd be feeling something real. He turned and walked back toward his horse,
his mind already racing with plans. He would prove himself, would become the man she deserved, would earn her trust back however long it took. And if in the end she chose Hastings anyway, if he lost her despite everything, at least he'd have tried. At least he'd have been brave enough to risk the one thing that actually mattered: his heart. Adrian left the ball before midnight and rode hard through freezing rain back to Blackthorn Manor. The cold felt good, clarifying, like it might shock some sense into him. He dismounted in the courtyard, water streaming from his coat, and found Preston waiting in the entrance hall with a towel and that carefully neutral expression that meant the steward was concerned but too professional to say so. "Your Grace, you're soaked through." "I'm fine." Adrian stripped off his gloves. "Get me the estate records. All of them. Tenant agreements, property maps, financial ledgers from the past 5 years. Preston blinked. "Sir, it's past midnight." "I'm aware of the time. I need those records in my study. Now." Something in Adrian's voice must have convinced the steward this wasn't negotiable. Preston nodded and disappeared. Adrian changed into dry clothes and went to his study. He lit every lamp, built up the fire until the room was almost too warm, and spread documents across every available surface. If he couldn't sleep, and he knew he wouldn't, he might as well do something useful. The records revealed what he'd suspected. The estate was profitable, well managed, functioning exactly as it should. Everything running with perfect efficiency, and completely soulless. He found the household accounts next, scanned through months of expenditures, noticed patterns he'd never paid attention to before. Lillian had been paying for things. Small things, mostly. A bonus for the head groom when his daughter got married, repairs to the chapel in the village that Adrian had deemed non-essential, a substantial donation to the local school. Her personal allowance had barely been touched. Everything went outward, to the staff, to the tenants, to people who needed help. Adrian sat back, a hollow feeling spreading through his chest. She'd been trying to make the estate, his estate, into something warm, something human, while he'd been focused on profit margins and efficiency. He kept reading, found correspondence between Lillian and the housekeeper about improving servants' quarters, a proposal to Preston about establishing a small lending library in the village, plans for a harvest festival that had never happened because Adrian had been too busy. Every page was evidence of Lillian trying to build a life here, a real life, not just an efficient machine, and he'd never noticed. Dawn was breaking when Adrian finally stopped. His eyes burned, his head ached, but something had crystallized in his mind. He couldn't go back and undo the past year, couldn't erase the damage he'd done, but he could stop being the person who'd caused it. The question was how. Preston appeared with breakfast, strong coffee and toast that Adrian didn't want, but ate anyway because the steward was watching with that concerned expression. "Your Grace, if I may speak plainly." Adrian looked up. "When have I ever stopped you?" "You look terrible, sir." "Thank you, Preston. Very helpful. I mean, you look like a man who's finally realized he's made a catastrophic mistake." The steward's voice was gentle. "What are you planning to do about it?" "I don't know yet. May I offer some advice?" Adrian gestured for him to continue. "Her Grace didn't leave because the house was wrong, or the estate was mismanaged, or because you failed to provide material comfort." Preston chose his words carefully. "She left because she was lonely, because trying to connect with you was like trying to embrace a statue, and statues, Your Grace, make very poor husbands." The words should have stung. Instead, they felt like confirmation of what Adrian already knew. "How do I fix that?" "I don't know if you can, sir, but if you're genuinely asking, start by becoming someone worth coming back to. Not the Duke, not the estate manager, just Adrian, the man she tried to know and couldn't find." After Preston left, Adrian sat alone with his coffee and thought about what that actually meant. Who was Adrian, stripped of titles and responsibilities and carefully constructed defenses? He didn't know. That was the problem. He'd spent so long building armor that he'd forgotten there was supposed to be a person underneath. 3 days later, Adrian did something he'd never done before. He went to the village himself. Not to inspect properties or review tenant complaints, just to walk through it. Actually see it. The main street was busy with morning activity. Shop doors opening, merchants setting up displays, children running to school. People noticed him immediately. The Duke rarely appeared in person, and conversation stuttered to a halt. Adrian ignored the stairs and kept walking. He stopped at the bakery first. The owner, Mrs. Brennan, looked startled when he entered. "Your Grace, is something wrong?" "No, I'd like to buy bread." She blinked. "Bread?" "Yes, whatever you'd recommend." Of course. The rye is fresh this morning, and the honey wheat is quite good. I'll take both." She wrapped them with shaking hands while Adrian looked around the small shop. Clean, well kept. A painting on the wall showed a young woman, Mrs. Brennan's daughter, he realized. The one who'd died 2 winters ago from fever. "I'm sorry about Margaret," Adrian said abruptly. "I should have said something at the time." Mrs. Brennan froze, the bread half wrapped. You knew her name?" "Lillian told me. She attended the funeral. Said Margaret had been kind to her when she first arrived." "She did." Mrs. Brennan's eyes filled with tears. "Her Grace sat with me for 2 hours after. Just sat. Didn't say much. Just stayed." Of course she had, because that's who Lillian was. Adrian paid for the bread and left before the conversation could get more uncomfortable. He continued down the street, stopped at the blacksmith's, the butcher's, the small shop that sold fabric and thread. At each place, he asked simple questions. How was business? Did they need anything? Were the winter stores adequate? People answered cautiously at first, clearly confused by this unprecedented attention. But Adrian kept asking, kept listening. He learned things, small things, important things. The blacksmith's son wanted to apprentice in metalwork, but couldn't afford the fee. The butcher's wife was pregnant with their 4th child and worried about space. The seamstress struggled every winter when wealthy clients went south and local orders dropped. Problems he could solve. Easily. With resources he had in abundance. Why had he never asked before? By the time Adrian returned to the manor, he had a list of 20 specific issues and a plan forming in his mind. He called Preston and the estate steward to his study. "I want to establish a fund for education, emergency medical costs, business loans, anything that helps the tenants and village residents improve their situations." Both men stared at him. "A fund, sir?" The estate steward ventured carefully. "Yes. Something managed locally, accessible without going through layers of bureaucracy. I want people to be able to ask for help without feeling like they're begging." "That's quite generous, Your Grace." "It's overdue." Adrian pulled out his notes. "Also, we're improving the servants' quarters. Better heating, proper windows, individual rooms instead of shared dormitories. And I want to hire a teacher for the village school, someone full-time, properly paid." Preston was looking at him like he'd grown a second head. "Your Grace, these changes will be expensive. I'm aware. Do it anyway." "May I ask what prompted this sudden interest in reform?" Adrian met his eyes directly. "Lillian tried to tell me the estate was more than numbers on paper. I didn't listen. I'm listening now." Understanding crossed Preston's face. "I see. Don't misunderstand. I'm not doing this to win her back." Adrian's voice was firm. "I'm doing this because it's right, because she was right, and because whether or not she ever forgives me, I need to be someone who deserves forgiveness." The changes began immediately. Adrian threw himself into the work with the same intensity he'd once reserved for profit margins. But this was different. This was about people. He met with the blacksmith's son personally, arranged an apprenticeship in the city, paid the fees himself. He authorized expansion of the butcher's home. He worked with the seamstress to establish a cooperative where local women could sell their work year-round. Word spread quickly. The Duke was different, accessible, actually helpful. Tenants started approaching him with problems they'd been sitting on for years. Adrian listened to every single one. Didn't always have immediate solutions, but he took notes, followed up, made things happen. The estate steward pulled him aside after 2 weeks. "Your Grace, I feel obligated to point out that this pace is unsustainable. You're working 16-hour days, meeting with every tenant personally, involving yourself in details that could be delegated. I know. You'll exhaust yourself." "Probably." Adrian didn't look up from the proposal he was reviewing. "But for the first time in years, I'm actually doing something that matters. So I'll take my chances." 6 weeks after Lillian left, Adrian received an unexpected visitor. Colonel Hartwell arrived unannounced on a gray February morning. Adrian met him in the library, bracing for confrontation. The older man looked tired. He accepted tea but didn't drink it. "I'm not here to yell at you," he said finally, "though I probably should. I wouldn't blame you if you did. Lillian told me what happened. At the ball." Adrian's chest tightened. "I shouldn't have cornered her like that." "No, you shouldn't have." Hartwell set down his cup. "But she also told me what you said. About your father. About being afraid." "That's no excuse for how I treated her." "No, it's not." The colonel's voice was firm, but not unkind. "But it's an explanation, and that's more than you gave her for 11 months. Silence settled between them. "She's struggling," Hartwell said quietly. "Trying to rebuild, trying to figure out who she is outside of being your wife. She won't admit it, but I can see it. The hurt goes deep." Adrian's hands clenched. "I know." "Do you?" "Because Adrian, my daughter, loved you. Actually loved you, despite everything you did to discourage it. And you broke her heart so thoroughly she doesn't trust herself anymore." The words landed like physical blows. "I didn't know," Adrian said hoarsely. "I didn't realize." "Of course you didn't. You were too busy protecting yourself to notice you were destroying someone else." It was the truth. Brutal. Undeniable. "I can't undo what I did," Adrian said finally, "but I'm trying to be different, trying to actually become the person she needed me to be." "Why?" "If you don't think she's coming back, why bother?" The question cut to the core. "Because she deserved better than what I gave her, and whether or not she ever sees it, I need to be better. For myself. Because living the way I was, that wasn't living at all. It was just existing." Hartwell studied him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. "Preston says you've been making changes. Real ones." "You've been talking to Preston?" "I've been talking to several people. The village has noticed. They're saying the Duke is actually human now." A slight smile crossed his face. High praise, considering. Adrian almost laughed. Almost. "I'm not doing it for praise." "I know. That's why I'm here." Hartwell leaned forward. "Adrian, I can't tell you how to fix this. I'm not sure it can be fixed. But I will tell you this. If you want any chance at all, you need to prove you've changed. Not with words, with actions. Sustained actions over time. And even then, Lillian may never trust you again." "I know. Can you accept that? Can you become this better person without the guarantee that it'll bring her back?" Adrian thought about it. Really thought. A month ago, the answer would have been no. Everything he did had always been transactional. Effort for reward. Investment for return. But something had shifted. The work he'd been doing in the village, the conversations with tenants, the slow rebuilding of what it meant to connect with people, none of that was getting him closer to Lillian. She didn't even know about most of it, and he was doing it anyway. "Yes," he said finally, "I can accept that." Hartwell stood. "Then maybe there's hope for you yet." After he left, Adrian sat alone in the library and let himself actually feel the weight of what he'd lost. Not just a wife, not just a marriage, but a person who'd seen something in him worth caring about, even when he'd given her nothing to work with. Who'd tried, day after day, to reach someone who kept retreating. Lillian had been braver than he'd ever been. She'd risked hoping, risked caring. While he'd chosen safety, chosen walls. And the cruel irony was that his walls hadn't protected him at all. They just ensured that when the pain came, and it had come anyway, he had no idea how to handle it. 2 months after Lillian left, spring arrived. The estate came alive with new growth. Fields turned green, trees budded. The world insisted on renewal whether Adrian was ready for it or not. He'd settled into a new routine. Up at dawn to meet with tenants before the day's work began. Afternoons reviewing estate business, but now with a focus on long-term sustainability and quality of life, not just profit. Evenings in the village, attending community meetings, listening to concerns, actually being present. It was exhausting. It was uncomfortable. It was the most alive he'd felt in years. People started responding differently. The wariness faded. Conversations became more natural. Someone even made a joke at his expense during a village meeting about the Duke finally learning that people needed more than efficient crop rotation. And Adrian laughed. Actually laughed. The room went silent. Then someone else laughed, tentatively. Then more joined in. It was a small moment, insignificant probably, But Adrian recognized it as a turning point. The moment people stopped seeing him as an untouchable authority and started seeing him as just a person, flawed, trying, human. One evening in late March, Adrian was reviewing plans for the Harvest Festival. Yes, he'd approved it this time, when Preston brought him a letter. "This just arrived, Your Grace. Personal correspondence." Adrian's heart jumped when he saw the handwriting. Lillian's. He opened it with hands that weren't quite steady. The letter was short, formal, but unmistakably her. "Adrian, my father tells me you've been making changes to the estate. I wanted to say that I'm glad. The tenants deserve a landlord who sees them as people, not assets. Whatever your reasons for these reforms, they're good and necessary. I also wanted to thank you for the education fund. Mrs. Brennan's grandson will benefit greatly from it. She wrote to tell me how much it meant to her that you remembered Margaret. I'm not writing this to suggest anything has changed between us, but I thought you should know that your efforts are noticed and appreciated. Please take care of yourself." Adrian read it 3 times. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't even warmth, really, just acknowledgement. But it was something. The first direct communication in 2 months. And buried in the formal language was a detail that made his chest tight. She was still paying attention, still keeping track of what happened at the estate, still connected, even from a distance. He sat down and wrote a response, threw it away, wrote another, threw that away too. Finally, on the 5th attempt, he kept it simple. "Lillian, thank you for writing. I'm doing this work because it's right, but knowing it matters to you means more than I can say. I'm learning, slowly, what you tried to teach me, that being strong doesn't mean being unreachable, that caring for people isn't weakness. I know I don't have the right to ask this, but if you're willing, I'd like to show you what's changed, not to pressure you, just so you can see for yourself. Whatever you decide, I hope you're well." He sent it before he could second-guess himself. 3 days later, her response came. "I'll come for the Harvest Festival in September. But Adrian, this isn't reconciliation. I'm coming to see the estate, not you. Please understand that." September. 6 months away. Adrian felt something cautiously unfurl in his chest. Not hope exactly. Hope felt too fragile, too presumptuous. But possibility. He had 6 months to prove he'd changed. 6 months to become someone who deserved a second chance, even if he never got one. He threw himself into the work with renewed intensity. The education fund expanded. The village school got its full-time teacher, a young woman from the city with progressive ideas about mixed-gender education that caused some controversy until the results started speaking for themselves. Adrian approved repairs to the chapel, expansion of the lending library, improvements to the market square. He met with every tenant personally to review their needs. Started a cooperative for local craftspeople. Funded a medical clinic. The estate transformed. Not overnight. Real change was slow, incremental, sometimes frustrating, but it transformed, and Adrian transformed with it. He started accepting dinner invitations from tenants, attended weddings and funerals, learned names, families, histories, started understanding that the estate wasn't just land and profit, it was a community, a living thing made of hundreds of individual lives, all interconnected. Preston watched the changes with something that looked like cautious pride. "Her Grace would be pleased," he said one evening. "Don't." Adrian's voice was sharp, then softer. "I can't think about that. I have to do this for its own sake, not as performance." "Of course, Your Grace, though I'd argue that understanding why something matters is different from using it as leverage." Adrian considered that. Fair point. Summer came. The estate flourished. The harvest promised to be abundant. Adrian continued the work, day after day, building something that felt increasingly like a life, instead of just existence. He still thought about Lillian constantly, still woke in the middle of the night remembering things. Her laugh, the way she tilted her head when listening, how her hair caught the light. But the pain had changed quality. Less sharp, more like an ache, bearable. And underneath it, slowly growing, was something new. Not hope. He was still too cautious for that. But a kind of quiet certainty that whatever happened, he was becoming someone he could actually live with. Someone who knew how to connect, how to care, how to be present. Someone who'd finally learned that walls don't keep you safe. They just keep you alone. August arrived with warm winds and the promise of harvest. Adrian was in the village square, helping set up booths for the upcoming festival, when Lord Hastings appeared. They hadn't spoken since that confrontation at the Pembroke's ball. Adrian tensed, prepared for conflict, but Hastings just leaned against a post and watched Adrian work for a moment. "Well," he said finally, "this is unexpected." Adrian straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. "What is?" "You, here, actually working." Hastings gestured at the festival preparations. "The servants say you've been like this for months, personally involved, present. They barely recognize you."
People change. Do they?
Hastings' voice was skeptical but not hostile. "Or do they just perform change when they want something?" It was a fair question. Adrian set down the hammer he'd been using and faced Hastings directly. "You think I'm doing this to win Lillian back? Aren't you? I'm doing this because I should have been doing it all along." Adrian's voice was steady. "Whether Lillian ever comes back or not, these people deserve a landlord who gives a damn about their lives. I'm trying to be that person." Hastings studied him. "You know she's coming in September." "I know. And you know it doesn't mean what you want it to mean." "I know that too." "Then why keep trying?" Adrian thought about how to answer that. The truth was complicated, messy, still evolving. Because the person I was, the one who drove her away, I can't be him anymore. It was killing me, slowly, in ways I didn't even recognize. So I'm trying to become someone different, someone capable of connection. And if Lillian never forgives me, at least I'll have become someone worth forgiving. Hastings was quiet for a long moment. "You really mean that?" "Yes."
Then I'll tell you something, Blackthorn. I was ready to hate you, ready to help Lillian move on and forget you existed. But watching this, he gestured at the village, the preparations, the life evident in every corner. "I'm starting to think you might actually be genuine." "I am." "Good. Because if you hurt her again, I'll make it my personal mission to destroy you." Adrian almost smiled. "Fair enough." Hastings pushed off from the post. "For what it's worth, I hope you get the chance to prove it. She deserves someone who's finally figured out what she's worth." He left before Adrian could respond. Adrian stood in the village square, surrounded by the results of months of work, and felt something shift. Not confidence exactly. He wasn't entitled to that, but readiness. Whatever happened in September, he'd be ready for it. Ready to show Lillian who he'd become. Ready to accept whatever she decided. Ready to finally be the man she'd needed him to be all along. September arrived with golden light and cooler mornings that promised autumn. Adrian woke before dawn on the day of the harvest festival, his stomach tight with nerves he couldn't quite name. Anticipation, maybe. Fear, definitely. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. Lillian was coming today. He'd known this for months, had prepared for it, worked toward it, built everything around this single day. But now that it was here, he felt completely unprepared. Preston found him in the conservatory an hour later, standing by the piano that still held Lillian's sheet music. "Your Grace, the festival preparations are nearly complete. The first guests will arrive within the hour." "Good." Adrian didn't move. "Preston, what if this doesn't work?" The steward was quiet for a moment. "Then you'll have still done something worthwhile. The estate is transformed. The people are thriving. That matters, regardless of what Her Grace decides." "I know, but you want her back." Preston's voice was gentle. "Of course you do. Just remember, you can't control her decision. You can only show her who you've become and let her choose." Adrian nodded, though his chest felt tight. "One more thing, Your Grace. Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you. Your mother would be too." The unexpected emotion in Preston's voice made Adrian's throat close. He managed a rough "thank you" before the steward tactfully withdrew. Adrian changed into simple, practical clothes, not his usual formal attire, but something appropriate for a working festival. Then he went to join the organized chaos of the village square. The transformation was remarkable. Booths lined the streets, overflowing with harvest vegetables, handmade crafts, baked goods. Bunting stretched between buildings. A small stage had been erected for music and dancing. Children ran everywhere, already sticky with honey cakes. The cooperative had outdone themselves. Quilts, pottery, metalwork,
all displayed with pride. The new teacher had organized a demonstration of student work. The medical clinic was offering free health consultations. It looked alive, vibrant, nothing like the cold, efficient operation Adrian had run for years. Mrs. Brennan caught his arm as he passed. "Your Grace, thank you for all of this, for remembering what matters. It's long overdue. I should have—" "You're doing it now. That's what counts." She squeezed his hand. "Her Grace will see the difference. Anyone with eyes could see it." Adrian wasn't so sure, but he appreciated the sentiment. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Adrian helped where needed, moving tables, settling disputes about booth placement, tasting pies for the baking competition with a solemnity that made the bakers laugh. He was judging the best preserves when he felt it, a shift in the crowd's energy. Conversations faltering, people turning. She was here. Adrian looked up and saw Lillian stepping down from a carriage at the edge of the square. She wore deep green, simpler than her usual formal gowns, her hair partially down. Clara was with her, and their father, but Adrian barely registered them. All he could see was Lillian. She looked different, stronger somehow. More self-possessed, like she'd shed some weight he hadn't known she was carrying. Their eyes met across the crowded square. Adrian's heart stopped, then kicked back into painful double time. He made himself stay where he was, didn't rush over, didn't presume, just waited. Mrs. Brennan appeared at Lillian's side almost immediately, embracing her warmly. Then the teacher, the seamstress, half a dozen other villagers. Everyone greeting her like she'd been gone too long, because she had been, and they'd missed her. Adrian watched Lillian's face light up with genuine warmth as she talked to people, asked about their lives, remembered details. This was what she'd been trying to bring to the estate all along, this connection, this care, this sense of community. She just needed a partner who understood its value. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Lillian made her way toward him. Her father and Clara hung back, giving them space. "Adrian," her voice was carefully neutral. "Lillian, welcome home," he caught himself. "Welcome back to the estate. Thank you for the invitation." She looked around the square, taking in the festival, the people, the energy. "This is impressive. It's what you wanted, what you tried to create. You're giving me credit for your work? I'm giving you credit for the vision. I just finally started listening." Lillian's expression was hard to read, not cold exactly, but guarded, protected. "Clara wants to see the lending library," she said finally. "And my father mentioned you've expanded the medical clinic. May I see them?" "Of course, I'll show you around." They walked through the village together, maintaining careful distance. Adrian pointed out changes, the improved school, the craftsmen's cooperative, the new community center that had once been a half-empty warehouse. At each stop, Lillian asked questions, specific probing questions that showed she understood exactly what she was looking at. "The education fund. How is it managed? Who decides the allocations?" "A committee. 3 villagers, the teacher, and Preston. I wanted local control, not top-down decisions." "And the medical clinic?" "We hired a doctor from the city, Dr. Matthews. She's young but excellent, trained at the best hospitals. She lives above the clinic rent-free in exchange for providing care regardless of ability to pay." Lillian paused outside the clinic, studying the sign. "This must be expensive." "It is. It's also necessary." That's not very characteristic of the Adrian I knew. I'm trying not to be that Adrian anymore. She looked at him then, really looked. Something shifted in her expression, not softening, exactly, but a crack in the armor. "Why? And please don't tell me it's because I left. I need to know this is real." Adrian had known this question was coming, had prepared for it. But standing here with Lillian's eyes searching his face for truth, all his rehearsed answers felt inadequate. Because the person I was, he wasn't living. He was hiding. Adrian's voice was rough. I told myself I was being strong, disciplined, in control. But I was just terrified. Of feeling, of needing, of being vulnerable. And that fear turned me into someone who couldn't connect with anyone, couldn't care about anything except maintaining walls that kept me safe and completely alone. So I was right. You were a coward. The bluntness should have stung. Instead, Adrian felt something like relief. "Yes,
You were absolutely right, and I'm sorry. Not just for how I treated you, though I am desperately sorry for that, but for wasting 11 months when you were right there, trying, and I was too scared to meet you halfway. Lillian's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Do you have any idea how long I waited to hear you admit that? I know. And I know saying it now doesn't fix anything. No, it doesn't. She brushed at her eyes angrily. You don't get credit for finally becoming honest after I left. That's not how this works. I know. Then why are you telling me? Because you asked. And because I'm done lying to you, done lying to myself. Adrian took a careful breath. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Lillian, or to come back. I just needed you to know that you were right about everything, and that changing myself, becoming someone capable of connection, that wasn't about winning you back. It was about surviving, about finally choosing to actually live instead of just existing. Lillian was quiet for a long moment, looking at the clinic, the village, anywhere but at him. Show me the rest, she said finally. They continued the tour. Adrian introduced her to Dr. Matthews, who mentioned how many patients they'd treated in the first month, showed her the community center, where a group of older men were playing cards and arguing cheerfully about politics. At the school, the teacher, Miss Reeves, lit up when she saw Lillian. Your Grace, the children have been so excited. We prepared something for you. She led them to a classroom where 20 students stood nervously. At Miss Reeves's signal, they began reciting, a poem they'd written collectively about the harvest, about community, about growth. It was simple, sweet, occasionally off rhythm. Beautiful. Lillian's hand went to her mouth. When the children finished, she applauded, tears streaming down her face. That was wonderful. All of you, thank you so much. The children beamed. Miss Reeves caught Adrian's eye and mouthed, thank you. Outside, Lillian wiped her eyes. You're funding this. The school, the teacher, the supplies. The estate is. It's an investment in. Don't. Her voice was sharp. Don't hide behind business language. You're funding it because these children deserve education and opportunity, because you finally understand that wealth means nothing if you don't use it to help people. Just say that. Adrian nodded slowly. You're right. I'm funding it because these children deserve better. And because for too long I treated everything, including people, as assets to manage instead of lives to support. There, something in Lillian's voice cracked. That's the honesty I needed. Not careful political answers, just truth. They walked in silence back toward the square, where music had started. Someone was playing violin, another person on accordion. Couples were dancing, awkward, joyful, completely unself-conscious. Colonel Hartwell appeared at their side. Lillian, Claire's looking for you. Something about the pie judging. Lillian nodded but didn't move immediately. She looked at Adrian. Thank you for showing me around. It's really remarkable what you've built here. What we've built. You started this, Lillian. I just finally stopped fighting it. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it, just nodded and left with her father. Adrian stood watching her disappear into the crowd, his chest aching. Preston materialized beside him. How did it go? I have no idea. The festival continued into evening. Adrian participated mechanically, judged competitions, made a brief speech thanking everyone for their contributions, tried not to watch Lillian constantly, failed at not watching Lillian constantly. She moved through the crowd like she belonged there, because she did. People sought her out, told her things, laughed with her. This was her community as much as his. Maybe more, because she'd actually nurtured these relationships while he'd been maintaining cold distance. As the sun set, someone called for dancing. Real dancing. Not the formal ballroom kind, but village dancing with simple patterns and lots of laughter. Adrian hung back, watching from the edge. He'd never been good at this kind of thing. Too rigid, too self-conscious. Then Lillian was in front of him, slightly breathless from the previous dance, her hair coming loose from its pins. Dance with me. It wasn't a question. Adrian's heart hammered. I'm not good at... I know, dance with me anyway. She held out her hand. Adrian took it. The moment their fingers touched, something electric shot through him. Lillian's eyes widened slightly. She'd felt it too. The music started, something fast and cheerful. Other couples joined in around them.
Adrian had no idea what he was doing, just tried to follow the basic pattern. He stepped on Lillian's foot, apologized, went the wrong direction, and nearly collided with another couple. Lillian laughed. Actually laughed. "You're terrible at this." "I warned you." "Yes, but I didn't realize you were this terrible." She was grinning now, the guardedness temporarily forgotten. "Left foot, Adrian. Left." He tried, failed, nearly tripped them both. Lillian was laughing so hard she could barely dance. "Stop thinking so much. Just feel the music." "I don't know how to do that." "I know. That's been your problem all along." But she said it gently, without anger. The song ended. Adrian was sweating, embarrassed, completely out of his element, and happier than he'd been in months. The next song was slower. Lillian didn't let go of his hand. "One more," she said quietly. This one Adrian could manage. Simple swaying, turning in slow circles, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something floral he remembered from before. "You've really changed," Lillian said softly. "Everyone here loves you, actually loves you. That's not something you can fake." "I'm trying to be someone worth loving." "Why now? Why not when I was still there, still trying?" The question he'd been dreading. Adrian took a breath. "Because I didn't realize I was dying inside. I thought being numb was the same as being strong. It took losing you to understand that protecting myself from pain was just a slower kind of death." "That's not fair." "I know. You don't get to realize this after I left, after I broke myself trying to reach you." Her voice shook. "You were supposed to figure it out while I was still there. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Lillian. Not because it'll change anything, but because you deserved so much better than what I gave you." They'd stopped dancing, just stood there, holding each other while the music played around them. Lillian pulled back slightly, looking up at him. Her eyes were wet. "I was so angry at you, for months, for wasting our time together, for making me feel invisible and unwanted and crazy, for thinking I deserved more. You weren't crazy. You deserved everything. I was just too broken to give it." "Are you still broken?" The question hung between them. Adrian thought about the past 6 months, the work, the connections, the slow, painful process of becoming someone who could feel without falling apart. "I'm less broken. Still learning, still scared sometimes." He met her eyes directly. "But I'm trying, every day, to be someone who can actually be present, who can care about people without treating it like a threat. Show me." "What?" "Show me you're different." Lillian's voice was intense. "Right now. No performances, no carefully prepared speeches. Just be honest with me about something real." Adrian's mind raced. What could he say? What truth would actually matter? Then he realized there was only one truth that counted. "I love you." The words came out rough, unpracticed. "I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe it was there all along, and I was too scared to admit it. But I love you, Lillian. The way you tried so hard with me, even when I gave you nothing. The way you care about people, really care, not just polite social caring. The way you play piano when you think no one's listening. How you remember everyone's names and their children's names and what matters to them. How you're brave enough to want connection, even after I showed you how badly it can hurt." Lillian's breath caught. "I love you," Adrian continued, "and I know that's not enough. I know love without action is meaningless. But I'm trying to match the feeling with behavior, trying to become someone who doesn't just love you in theory, but shows it in practice, every day, whether you're here to see it or not." Tears were streaming down Lillian's face now. "You can't just say that. You can't just after everything." "I know. I'm not asking you to say it back. I'm not asking for anything. You wanted honesty. That's the truth." The music had stopped. People were staring. Adrian didn't care. Lillian looked at him for what felt like forever. Then, without warning, she stepped close and pressed her forehead against his chest. Adrian froze, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. "I hate this," Lillian said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "I hate that you finally figured it out. I hate that I still care. I hate that seeing you like this, actually present, actually trying, makes me want to forgive you." Adrian's arms came up slowly, carefully, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. He held her gently, like she might shatter. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. I just needed you to know the truth. The truth is complicated. I know. The truth is I'm terrified. Because you hurt me so badly, Adrian, made me doubt everything about myself, and even seeing all this, she gestured vaguely at the village. Even knowing you've changed, I'm scared of trusting you again, scared of going back to that house and slowly becoming invisible. You could never be invisible. I was just too blind to see you. Pretty words, but words are easy. Words, you're right. Adrian took a careful breath. So let me offer something harder. Don't come back to the manor. Not yet, maybe not ever if that's what you need, but let me court you. Actually court you, like we're starting over. Let me prove day by day that I'm different. No pressure, no expectations, just a chance to show you I mean this. Lillian pulled back enough to look at him. Court me? Yes, properly. The way I should have from the beginning. Let me take you to dinner, write you letters, have actual conversations where I listen instead of planning my escape. Let me be present for you the way you tried to be present for me. And if I say no? Adrian's heart clenched, but he kept his voice steady. Then I accept that. And I keep trying to be better anyway, because this isn't about winning you back. It's about being someone worthy of you, whether you're with me or not. Lillian searched his face, looking for cracks in the honesty. She wouldn't find any, because this was the most honest Adrian had ever been in his life. I need time, she said finally, to think, to figure out if I can trust this. Take all the time you need. I'm serious, Adrian. I'm not making any promises. I might decide I can't do this, that too much damage was done. I understand. Do you? Because you look hopeful. And hope is dangerous right now. Adrian managed a slight smile. Can't help the hope, but I can respect your boundaries. Whatever you decide, I'll accept it. Lillian nodded slowly. Then, unexpectedly, she reached up and touched his face. Just her fingers against his jaw, brief and gentle. You have changed. I can see it, feel it. I just don't know if it's enough. That's fair. She stepped back, putting distance between them again. I should find Clara. She'll be wondering where I went. Of course. Lillian started to leave, then paused. Adrian, thank you for this. For the festival. For actually caring about these people. It matters. Then she was gone, absorbed back into the crowd. Adrian stood alone in the middle of the square, his heart racing, that dangerous hope blooming in his chest, despite his attempts to control it. It wasn't yes, but it wasn't no either. It was possibility. The festival wound down slowly. Families headed home, children asleep on their parents' shoulders. The musicians played softer, slower songs. Lanterns glowed in the growing darkness. Adrian helped with cleanup, his mind only half present. He kept replaying the conversation, the dance, the moment Lillian had rested her forehead against his chest. Preston found him stacking chairs. Her Grace and her family have departed. They're staying at the Hartwell estate tonight. Adrian nodded, something sinking in his chest. Of course, she wouldn't stay here. That would be too much, too soon. However, Preston continued, before she left, she asked me to give you this. He handed Adrian a folded note. Adrian opened it with shaking hands. I'm coming back Tuesday, just to visit, to talk. Don't read too much into it. I'm still figuring things out. But I think we should try having an actual conversation, a real one, where we both tell the truth. Adrian read it 3 times, his throat tight. Tuesday, 3 days away. Good news, sir? Preston asked carefully. I don't know, maybe. Adrian folded the note carefully. She's willing to talk. That's more than I deserve. It's a start, Your Grace. Yes. Adrian looked around the square, evidence of everything he'd built, everything he'd changed. It's a start. The next 3 days were torture. Adrian tried to work. Failed. Tried to sleep. Failed harder. His mind kept racing through possible conversations, possible outcomes, possible disasters. On Monday night, he gave up on sleep entirely and went to the conservatory. He sat at the piano, stared at the keys. Lillian's sheet music was still there, Rachmaninoff, the piece that reminded her of her mother. Adrian had never played, didn't know how, but he touched the keys gently, pressing them one at a time. No melody. Just connection. To the instrument she loved. To the music that mattered to her. "You're doing it wrong." Adrian spun around. Lillian stood in the doorway, wrapped in a cloak against the night chill. "You're early," Adrian said stupidly. "I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about everything. So I had them bring me over." She stepped into the conservatory. "I didn't expect to find you here." "I couldn't sleep either." Lillian came to stand beside the piano. "You don't play?" "No, I was just, I don't know, trying to feel closer to you, I guess." "That's," she smiled slightly, "ridiculous and kind of sweet. I'm trying. I can see that." Lillian sat on the bench. "Move over." Adrian shifted, giving her room. Their shoulders brushed. Lillian's fingers found the keys and the Rachmaninoff filled the space. Melancholy, beautiful, aching. Adrian listened, barely breathing. When she finished, silence settled like snow. "I've missed this," Lillian said quietly. "Playing here. The acoustics are perfect." "It's yours. Always was. I just didn't tell you that." "You didn't tell me a lot of things." "I know." Lillian turned to face him fully. "Adrian, I need you to understand something. If we're going to try this, and I'm not saying we are, just if, I need guarantees." "What kind of guarantees?" "That you won't shut down again. That when things get hard or scary, you won't retreat into that cold, distant place. That you'll actually talk to me instead of building walls." "I can't promise I'll be perfect. I'm still learning how to do this." "I don't need perfect. I need present. I need someone who tries, even when it's uncomfortable." "I can promise that." Adrian met her eyes. "I can promise I'll try. Every day. To be here. To be honest. To let you in, even when it terrifies me." "Why should I believe you?" "Because I've spent 6 months proving it to everyone else. Let me prove it to you." Lillian's eyes searched his face. "This is crazy. I left you. I was done. And now I'm sitting here considering giving you another chance. I know, and I know how unfair it is to ask, stop." She put her hand over his mouth. "Stop apologizing. Stop being so careful. Just tell me what you actually want." Adrian pulled her hand away gently, but kept holding it. "I want you back. I want to wake up and have breakfast with you and actually talk about our days. I want to learn what makes you laugh. I want to fight with you when we disagree and figure out how to resolve it instead of shutting down. I want to build an actual life together instead of just existing in parallel." "That's terrifying." "I know. What if you change your mind? What if you decide being vulnerable is too hard and you retreat again? Then you call me on it. You don't let me get away with it. You demand better." Adrian squeezed her hand. "I'm not asking you to trust blindly. I'm asking you to let me earn trust. Slowly. With actions, not words." Lillian was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face. "I loved you so much," she whispered. "Those first months. I saw glimpses of who you could be, and I loved that person so much, and you broke my heart by refusing to be him. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know you are. That's what makes this so hard." She wiped at her eyes. "Because I want to believe you've changed. I want to believe this is real. But I'm scared, Adrian, so scared of going through that again." Adrian lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. "Then we go slow. We rebuild trust piece by piece. And if you need to leave again, if I ever make you feel invisible or unwanted, you leave. No guilt, no hesitation. You protect yourself first. You're giving me permission to leave? I'm giving you the freedom to choose. Every day. To stay or go based on how I'm actually treating you, not how I'm promising to treat you." Lillian laughed, watery and broken. "You've really changed." "I'm trying." "Stop saying that. You have changed. I can see it." She cupped his face with her free hand. The old Adrian would never have had this conversation, would never have admitted vulnerability, would never have given me power over him. The old Adrian was a coward. I'm trying not to be him anymore. "And if I say yes? If I agree to try this?" Adrian's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it.
Then we start over, properly. I court you. I learn who you actually are instead of who I assumed you were. We build something real together. Here? At the manor? Wherever you want. We can split time between here and your father's estate. We can travel. Whatever makes you feel safe. Lillian was quiet for a long moment, her thumb brushing across his cheekbone. I need conditions, she said finally. Anything. We have dinner together every night, real dinner where we actually talk. No reading correspondence at the table, no using work as an excuse to avoid conversation. Done. You don't make decisions about the estate without consulting me. I'm not decoration. I'm your partner. I want to actually be involved. Absolutely. And if I'm having a hard day, or I'm sad, or I need comfort, you don't fix it. You don't solve it. You just be there, present. Can you do that? Adrian thought about it honestly. I don't know if I'm good at that yet, but I'll try. I'll ask you what you need instead of assuming, and I'll be there, even when I don't know what to do. That's all I'm asking. Effort, presence, honesty. Then yes, I can do that. Lillian smiled, tentative, fragile, but real. Okay? Okay. Okay, we can try. Slowly. With boundaries. And if you mess this up again, Adrian, if you make me feel invisible or unwanted, I'm gone. For good this time. I understand. Do you? Because I mean it. I love you. I think I never stopped loving you, which is why this hurts so much. But I won't sacrifice myself again. I deserve better. You do. And I'll spend every day proving I can be better. Lillian leaned forward, resting her forehead against his like she had at the festival. I'm still scared, she whispered. Me too. Good. Scared means we know the stakes. They sat like that for a long time, just breathing together in the quiet conservatory. Finally, Lillian pulled back. It's late. I should stay. The word came out before Adrian could stop it. I just mean stay here, at the manor, in your rooms. We can have breakfast together tomorrow. Start practicing this thing where we actually talk. Lillian bit her lip, considering. Just breakfast. No expectations beyond that. Just breakfast. Okay. She stood, smoothing her dress. Then I'll see you in the morning. She started toward the door, then paused, turned back. Adrian? Yes? Thank you for changing, for trying, for finally becoming the person I needed you to be. Thank you for giving me the chance to prove it. She smiled, small but genuine, and left. Adrian sat alone at the piano, his heart full of that dangerous hope, and let himself believe that maybe, possibly, this could actually work. That maybe he'd finally learned the lesson his fear had kept him from understanding, that walls don't keep you safe. They keep you alone. And that the risk of caring, of being vulnerable, of letting someone matter, was terrifying. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was the cold, empty existence he'd been living. The slow death of never connecting, never feeling, never truly being alive. He'd survived that. Barely. But he didn't want to just survive anymore. He wanted to live. With Lillian. Building something real, something warm and messy and imperfect and human. It wouldn't be easy. He'd stumble, make mistakes, probably scare her off a few more times before he got it right. But he'd keep trying every single day because she was worth it. And because finally, he understood that he was worth it too. Worth the effort of becoming someone who could love without destroying himself. Who could care without falling apart. Who could be strong enough to be vulnerable. Morning came slowly, golden light filtering through the conservatory windows. Adrian stayed there until dawn, sitting at the piano, occasionally pressing random keys, thinking about everything that had changed and everything that still needed to change. When he finally went to the breakfast room, Lillian was already there. She'd put flowers on the table, fresh ones from the conservatory. Her doing, not the servants. Good morning, she said, pouring tea for both of them. Good morning. Adrian sat down across from her, feeling suddenly absurdly nervous. So, Lillian added honey to her tea. Earl Grey with honey, never sugar, the detail he'd noticed months ago. We're really doing this. We're really doing this. It's going to be awkward sometimes. Probably. And hard. Definitely. But maybe worth it. Adrian met her eyes. Definitely worth it. Lillian smiled, real and warm and hopeful.
And Adrian Blackthorne, Duke of the Northern Frontier, master of 15,000 acres, and a fortune most men would kill for, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, not because all the problems were solved, but because for the first time in his adult life he was choosing connection over safety, choosing vulnerability over control, choosing to actually live instead of just exist. And the woman across from him, the one who'd fought for their marriage long after he'd given up, who'd had the courage to leave when staying would have destroyed her, who was brave enough to give him one more chance despite every reason not to. She was choosing to try too. It was messy, complicated, uncertain. It was human. And that, finally, was enough.